Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about tone on the guitar and specifically how the pick will affect tone. Now, usually people will hear this and they think, okay, you're going to talk about maybe pick thickness, pick size, pick shape, and we will touch on those things, but this is actually going to be more about pick rotation. This is something that I feel like is not mentioned as often as those other things. And I think it can have a big impact in both the feel of how you're playing as well as the sound and the tone. So first, I'd just like to throw out there that in the description, I have a link to my Patreon, which I set up a few videos ago. If you'd like to support the channel, help me make videos more often and so on, I'd appreciate any help as donations. There's no reward tiers or anything. It's just if you feel like you can help out, I would appreciate it. So with the pick, just to start off, let's talk about some general tone things. Generally, we hear string size, the guitar, of course, the materials, and so on. We hear about the tone controls, and I should mention briefly that for this, my guitar will have the tone up almost all the time, maxed, not turned down at all. Very commonly at the beginning, guitarists hear things like, I'm going to play jazz, I have to roll down the tone all the way. And very often you see that on like somebody's playing a solid body and they roll it down and it's like, it sounds to them like they're approximating an arch top. When we hear classic, players like Kenny Burrell, Wes Montgomery, it's a pretty bright sound. It's not the tone control all the way down sound. There are great players who do that, who roll the tone down. Depending on the room, I'll roll it down too. Not that I'm saying I'm one of those players, but I suggest that for this, even if you're used to rolling the tone down, to turn the tone up all the way so you can really hear the difference between the pick techniques we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to be using a standard medium pick. This is a, what do they call these? Sculpted plectra. I forget the name. It'll come back to me. It's a Dunlop pick. You probably recognize it. Prime tone, that's I think what it's called. And it's 0.88, so it falls within medium. It's flexible. If I can get that up here. You can see it here. Let me do it this way. Right, so it's a flexible medium pick. Maybe a little thicker than normal medium. I'll do a standard medium after this one. So normal playing, we have the pick straight against the string, right? So if we have, this is the string, the pick will be going straight across like this. Hopefully that plain sound isn't coming in through the mic. It'll pass in a second if it is. So I'm just going to play a few notes with the pick flat against the string. Now listen to the difference before I tell you what it is. So first, second. All I've done for the second thing is to rotate the pick. If this is flat, I've rotated it like this. There is another way to do this, and I am not the person to ask about this. I can recognize it, but I've not practiced it. That's the George Benson picking technique. He uses medium picks. Lots of jazz players use medium picks, even though stereotypically we think of like the Jazz 3 small pointy teardrop shaped pick. Heavy picks, seem to be associated with jazz, and lots of players use them. That's probably why. But he uses a medium pick. And what he does to get the pick rotation, instead of rotating this way, he brings his hand underneath here. Again, this might not be exact, but his hand comes under here, and the pick is now rotated upwards. Like, how can I angle this? Like that. So instead of flat, it comes around like this. And the pick will be, I can't really probably do this well, but yeah, I can't even play like this. And I started going back to my normal position too. But that's another way to rotate the pick. There's a guy named Peter Mazza who teaches this. He's studied with George Benson for a long time, I think. Great player too. If you're interested specifically in George Benson picking, I would look him up. But so the way I deal with this instead is, because I don't have to change my whole hand position and everything, is if I'm normally picking like this, I'll just turn my thumb like that. So if this is the angle normally, just rotating like this, and that brings the index finger over as well. So now what this is doing, if this is the string, instead of being flat like that, it's turning it this direction, and we have the round part of the pick at the tip rolling over the string. If I do it all the way, it would be extremely quiet because there's nothing pulling on the string anymore. So that doesn't really work. So there's a balance with how much you turn it. For me, it's about, if we think of that versus all the way around, let's say this is at 9 o'clock and this is at 12 o'clock. I'm gonna write about like 10 o'clock or 10:30. So it's not halfway between the two. And all of a sudden we get this much more, let me do it first flat. And I should mention too that I don't normally play with medium picks, and I'll get into that later. So maybe I should play slower since I'm not used to these. So that's flat, and this is rotated. Sorry. So it's quite a difference. Let me go to a standard medium instead, like it's not a Fender, but it's the same material as Fender medium. These kinds, it's a little more flexible than the prime tone I was just using. So flat with these, even more kind of brittle sounding, right? And now rotated. So rotated, flat, rotated, and flat. So one big advantage of this is that you have now contrasting sounds without needing to do anything changing picks. With one pick, you now have more than one sound available. With chords, one of the advantages of a flexible pick is that for strumming, it's almost like made for strumming, because it will flex in your fingers even if you're holding it tightly. So if I'm playing, let me rotate it actually, just to hear what that sounds like. So you can still have a dark chord sound, but if I keep it flat, you have two different options. And if you're doing like 4 on the floor playing, then it can really cut through quite nicely. You get this percussive sound, which you will get with a thick pick as well, but the flexibility gives you kind of a different kind of percussive sound while you're strumming. I think that's everything about the medium picks. Let me move over to the kind of pick that I use. Oh, this is the kind of pick that I use, but it's not the same size that I use. This is a Bluechip pick. Highly recommend this brand. I've played probably every kind of, well, not literally, but I feel like I've played every kind of pick that there is. And once I found Bluechip, I stopped looking. The material is expensive. I think it's like $1,000 for a block of this material. So they charge $35 per pick. If you don't lose picks, they'll last forever. They don't wear or anything like that. But if you lose picks, of course, probably not the best option. So this is rigid. This is something like 1.4 millimeters or something. It bends a little bit, but not enough that I'd say it really flexes. So if I play flat with this pick, flat against the string, it's kind of closer to the curved sound, the tilted sound with the medium pick. Now, if I rotate this, it sounds like this. Here's standard, and here's tilted. It's even darker. So versus flat. So not as much of a contrast, and honestly that gets a little too dark for me by turning it. But this is a good example of the tone is wide open on the guitar, the kind of contrast that we can have using our technique versus just rolling the tone down. And again, rolling the tone down is fine, but I think it's really both interesting and important to know about how your technique can affect your sound like this. So this is a Bluechip standard pick. I'm going to move over to what I normally use now, which I think is what a lot of people think of jazz players using. Teardrop shaped pick. It's also a Bluechip pick. No flexibility at all. It's like 1.6 or 1.7 millimeters, so it's on the thicker side. And because it's smaller, there's going to be less flexibility as well. So let me show you what happens with this flat versus tilted. So here's flat, and here's tilted. Almost exactly the same to my ears, at least. The reason for this is that we don't have as much of a rounded tip anymore. We have more of a sharp angle here. And when we rotate it, there's not a smooth curve for the pick to roll off of. So we end up with a similar sound between those two. For me, I've used the medium picks for a while, and I'll still go to them occasionally, but I've used this size pick so much in the past that I keep going back to it. Even though I like having the contrast of the medium pick, I just find that, you know, the muscle memory with this is going to be, it's much easier just for me to use one. So rotating, I'll still keep my finger rotated like this because there are other advantages by rotating instead of being like this flat against the string to have it rotated. One is that as the pick is flat against the string, the pick will move between, how do I do this? Between your fingers. Unless you hold it really tight, there's going to be some movement here. But if I go like that, yeah, well, you get the idea. Let me actually, hold on. Let me get the bigger pick so you can see easier. Like this, if I rotate it, then basically it's going this direction against the pick. And well, let's just put it this way. If the pick is straight like this and you try to push down on it while you're holding it, depending on how you're holding it, the pick might move like this. That's one thing I like about Bluechip picks is they don't rotate in my fingers at all. But there's not going to be any flexibility there because you have all this material blocking you now versus that much material. And also because it's easier to keep a grip on that without it moving versus this, where it's going to pull up in your fingers. So what I'll do is take a sanding block, like for manicuring your nails. There's like 4 sides, different grits. And I'll use this also if you get like a plastic pick and there's flushing or flashing, I think it's called, where there's like rough plastic on the sides. You can just go through all 4 on here and it'll get the surface to be just as shiny as a new pick. It's really useful for picks in general. This is like 50 cents or something and it lasts for a really long time. But what I'll do is the way that I have the pick tilted, so if it's like this, I will keep that angle and then go to the block and almost act like I'm kind of playing against the string here. And then I'll rotate the pick, I'll turn it around, go back, get the angle that I'm playing on the guitar, come to the block, and kind of play against the block again on all 4 sides. And I've already done it with this pick, otherwise I'd show you the whole process. What this does is it wears the pick on the side that you're tilted against and makes it kind of roll off the string a little bit more smoothly. This is called, by a lot of companies, it's called a speed bevel. If you're ever ordering, like Bluechip I think calls it that, you don't really need them on a flexible pick because the pick is going to flex for you. But on thicker picks, this speed bevel is something that will wear eventually naturally on some materials. As the strings start to wear against the pick, it'll eat away the material. So this simulates that kind of worn-in pick feeling, and also helps that if you do have the pick tilted while you play, flat versus tilted, then it will kind of suit that tilt a little bit better. Even if you're not tilting the pick, it's worth getting one of those manicure blocks just because if you get new picks and there's rough edges, or if you damage your pick while you're playing and you need a quick fix, you can just go through all 4 grits there and it'll make it feel like new again. Or let you customize the shape at the end. So, sorry, I keep forgetting this mic is here. I think that about covers everything. Just think through. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You can always look up on Google like the player that you like and then type of pick or something like that, like what pick does Pat Metheny use or something like that. I think he uses thin picks actually, and he uses the back of the pick, the round part, and rotates it. So that's another good example. Very dark sound, right, with a thin pick, which is not something you would be getting at all if the pick was flat against the string. I think unless he changed, I know Mark Whitfield was using medium picks back when I was at a camp with him in 20 years ago now or something like that. But yeah, you'll find out that lots of players end up using these flexible picks, and very often the sound that they get is because they're rotating it. So I think if anything, it's interesting, worth checking out, because it will give you other options with how you're playing. Once you do the rotation, you might find, like me, that it actually helps your playing. You'll have to probably figure out when you're going to want to rotate it versus when not. So like if I'm playing sweep picking, then I will go flat against the string. Because if I rotated it, it just feels like it's getting caught a little bit versus flat. So that the flat part of it lets me kind of get definition sweeping through like that more than tilting it there. For chord playing, if I'm using a medium pick on the off chance that I am, I'll keep it flat usually, because that's one of the advantages of being able to have that option between the two. I think, so for normal, yeah, I'll generally keep it flat for chord playing with the jazz shape pick. Probably, now that I think about it, because having this movement is actually something that is close, will help me get a sound that I like with chords. If I kept it curved, actually immediately it doesn't quite feel right, because the point of the tip is dragging through the strings that way. So I guess that answers the question of why I do that. If you have any questions, let me know. I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about here. If you have any suggestions for future videos, let me know. Again, if you'd like to support the channel, help me out, Patreon is in the description. I would appreciate any help at all. And I hope you all have a great day. Take care.